Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
There's a lot of politicians throughout throughout our history that have talked about the border issue as a way to stir up or to the kind of everything. The borders are one of the definitions of our country, and we need to close them. And as the Border Patrolman, who was the former president of the Border Patrol Union and the head of the Border Patrol in that area, he said we need high fences, but we need open gates. We go through that, and then what happens to them when they come to this country? They are still liable for labor exploitation. That's their lives. They are now illegal. There is no way that they can legally work in this country. They cannot support themselves. They cannot pay taxes. Everything they do, we're creating this understory of exploitable poor that will be exploited and will impact the price of labor and the wage of labor for every other American, every working American.
Passion on how you will fix the border crisis when elected President of the United States of America.
Of all the heads of state that she and Jack met when they were in the White House, and they had met people like de Gaulle and Eamon de Valera, who was the liberator of Ireland and the George Washington of Ireland, a very impressive man. But she said none of them matched Yerska Margo. And 2.5 million people flooded into the Central Square in Bogota and to greet my uncle with this incredible emotional outpouring. And Yerska Margo turned to my uncle and he said, "Do you know why they love you?" And my uncle said no. And he said, "Because they think that you've put America on the side of the poor." And to me, that's where America ought to be. It ought to be on the side of the poor. So those are the people that I would want to represent as president. And I know the desperation. I haven't been recently to the San Fernando Valley, but I've been to a lot of places in this country that look like it, including Eastern Ohio, and Western Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, and Cleveland, Ohio, and many, many other places. And I've seen the desperation that working people in this country are dealing with. We're living in a country today where 57% of Americans could not put their hands on $1,000 if they have an emergency in their family. We're living in a country where 35% of Americans do not make enough money to meet basic human needs, which is food, transportation, and shelter. The average income in this country for Americans is $5,000 less than the money it takes to survive. So how are people making up for basic necessity, $5,000 less, and what is needed for basic necessities? And I've watched people, in Yuma, in the food banks and in the grocery stores, change the recipes for their food so that they can make it through the grocery line. $3 trillion down, and $330 billion were added during the Biden and Trump administration, the highest, with the same policies. In both administrations, the same economic policies that people are now, both President Trump and President Biden are running based upon those economic policies that have completely failed the middle class in this country. So if they win, we can expect more of the same. But because people are funding their lives on credit card bills now, they have to make tough choices. Americans, including those you're talking about, families are sitting, in their living rooms at night and listening to a baby cry in the room next door and wondering whether that baby is $100 sick or $300 sick or $500 or $1,500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. And they're choosing between medicine and food. They're choosing between food and gasoline for their car. They're making these terrible, terrible, terrible choices every day, these nightmare choices, which is the opposite of the American dream. They're looking at a gas light or an engine light come on in their car, and it is Armageddon for them. It's the end of the world, because there's no way they can bring that car to a mechanic and get that fixed. And they're living in terror. And, those are the people that I'm going to be representing as president.